Hi, having a great day. You're watching JG Entertainment, and for this video, I'm gonna go over how Andor Episode 7 explores three specific themes that is going to be police brutality, fascism, and racism. So it explores these themes really well with a couple scenes from this episode which are key and they're really interesting. So yeah, that's what I'm going over this video. It's gonna be a short video. I will be having my Andor Episode 7 breakdown later on, but I really wanted to focus on a specific video on this topic because I think it was really interesting. I decided to include it in this episode, and I think it worked really well. So let's get started. So how does Andor Episode 7 incorporate racism, police brutality, and fascism into this episode? Well, we get started with the flashbacks that Andor has with his father figure Clem, who had hanged up after he tried to stop protesters from using brutal force against with Stormtroopers when they were protesting. So that was interesting. And not even hearing his side, we just see the Stormtroopers immediately pick up the guns and just assume that they're going to shoot them. But then later on, you see in the episode that you see Clem hanged up, which is really interesting. That he just Andor's walking by, he sees him hanged up. And of course, in the previous episode, Luthen has said that they hanged up his father. So that's just like really bad. And this just shows you that first of all, they didn't even hear his side, and they just assumed everything and gave him the worst punishment that they can possibly give him. Now, Clem was a person of color. He was a person of color, and that's really interesting. It's interesting they decided to first of all cast this actor as a person of color because it has nothing to do with it. So this actor is interesting. They decided to cast his color as a person of color, and it's interesting they decided to give him as terrible punishment as hanging him up, which I think is just like wow, that's really strong message that they're trying to give there. And I think that really works. I think it works that they're trying to show yes they like full-on police brutality just because somebody threw something at them, boom, you're about to like shoot all these people, and they didn't even hear his side. They immediately went to let's kill this guy because he's definitely part of it and he's definitely part of the violence, and let's hang him up, which is super like just disgusting. So yeah, I think that's really important to what the themes of this episode is trying to explore. Now beyond that, they moved on into showing this theme once again at the very end of this episode with Cassian. Whenever Cassian was caught walking into the store and then being accused of committing crime with a bunch of other people that were like actually committing the crime by just the way that he looked and how he talked, which is just really interesting, and clearly they showed that yes, this is definitely something that's kind of visually motivated. And then an Imperial droid came, and that we all thought was K2A, so come on, let's be honest. But anyways, an Imperial droid came, and by force, he hold him by grabbing him by the neck really hard, making him hard to breathe. You can tell by Diego Luna's acting, he was like, so making him hard to breathe and picking him up while holding him by the neck. So yeah, that's one brutal force, like super bad brutal force. And then once in court, once he was in court, he went from being found guilty based on no evidence, just on the word of the Imperial people, not even hearing Andor's side, to being charged 6 months. And then once Andor tried to defend himself and say, I didn't do any of this, this is madness, I'm just a tourist here, they charged him from 6 months to 6 years just for talking, just for trying to defend himself. So that's just disgusting. That's like a complete disgusting thing. So they're really trying to show this empire and how they rule, and it's really interesting. Now there's something that Tony Gilroy has said himself in many interviews, as he says he wants to reflect the real world, and he wants to reflect the themes of what exactly? Well, police brutality, which I mentioned, fascism, and racism. So let's go over police brutality first, just to show it. First of all, Clem immediately got shot after they just assumed that he did everything, and then they hanged him up. That's itself police brutality. Then, whenever they actually started grabbing Cassian by the neck, the Imperial droid, that's full-on police brutality, choking him, making it hard to breathe. Full-on police brutality. So that's really interesting. Then there's fascism. Fascism is the concept of government acting by force to make everybody listen to rules and everything, and they are 100% doing that. Like they're acting full-on by force, shooting people, putting people in jail for things that just immediately a bunch of years in jail and everything. So yeah, fascism is definitely a concept that's been explored right here, and the Empire is definitely much of a government that has a lot of fascism. So that's really interesting. And then there's racism. Now, how exactly do they incorporate racism? And that's something that Tony Gilroy himself has admitted that he definitely wanted to incorporate to this. And Stephen Skiff, who was the writer for this episode, did that beautifully in this episode. And Tony Guru was a producer for this episode. And basically, they incorporated racism, first of all, with the actor. The actor Clem was an actor of color. So that just adds to the reason why they just assumed that Clem was part of the trouble, which is interesting. And then there's Andor, who obviously is played by Diego Luna, who is Latino. And the accent that he has was, as soon as he started talking, that's when the Imperial person was like, the Stormtrooper, he was like, okay, you're guilty. You're definitely guilty. So that's really interesting. So I found that interesting. And then when he starts to defend himself, once again, they found him guilty just by the person that he is, by saying he's a tourist, by the way he talked, all that type of stuff. Like, that was like really bad. Like, you can tell, yes, there's some racism going on here, and that's just really interesting that they had to explore that in this episode, because they haven't explored that ever since episode 1. You know, whenever Andor was kind of harassed, ever since the first scene when Andor was harassed for being like Latino, they made a joke about him. That's really interesting. So they keep exploring that, and they're clearly not backing off of this topic. And I think it's interesting how they move on past just like getting harassed to like full on police brutality, killing, hanging up people, which is really interesting. And in fact, I think this actually mirrors a lot of the real world, just like Tony Guru said that he wanted, as it mirrors the very tragic case of George Floyd, which we obviously went super popular and like it just blew up everywhere just because, you know, they killed this one guy for being a guy of color and holding him by the neck, which I think was an obvious nod just by the way Andor was being held and making him hard for breathe. And then the way that the deportation system in the U.S. ICE treats the immigrants, which is just terrible conditions, sentencing them for things that they weren't guilty, just send them back and stuff like that. So I think this is really interesting how they just are doing this in this episode, and I think it just worked really, really well. And I can't wait to see what other themes they keep exploring in Andor. And yeah, that's what I got for this video. How Andor episode 7 announcement explores police brutality, fascism, and racism. If you enjoyed this video, it would be very helpful if you left a like. So please leave a like. It would be very, very helpful. Also, just make sure to subscribe for a lot more content like this. Like I said, I have my Andor episode 7 breakdown coming forward with a bunch of more stuff like this video. A little bit shorter, but a bunch of more stuff like this. And in this video as well, I'm going to keep doing more themes that Andor shows. So yeah, make sure to blow up this video if you want to see more videos like this. And that's it. Just make sure to comment down below. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think Andor explored this theme with these scenes? Do you think they explored any other themes in the episode? I am very curious to that down in the comments. And yeah, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a great day. And this is JB Entertainment.